Recording. 3, 2, 1. Go ahead, Steve.
All set?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. So hello out there. And today, I am Steve Wolfson, and I am a longtime evolutionary astrologer that in the last 5 years has been increasingly focusing on applying the insights and information and perspective that evolutionary astrology affords us into how do I change my life with this information. In other words, if I'm being pointed to, just to use a simple example, if I'm being pointed to a north node and I have a south node, which means I've been a certain way for a really long time, how do I move myself from my established patterns and habits of the south node towards the new directions that I literally don't know much about, which is why they're called the north node? How do I do this? And how do I deal with the emotions and the conditioning that are inevitably going to arise? So I've been focusing on this in my own life, and also in working with people that are in their own process of growth, shedding, and change in what I call waking up, which to me means dropping or allowing conditioning, habits, programming, set ways I have seen myself to just fall away. Interestingly, I have subscribed to the theory that this is hard work and requires a lot of effort. And increasingly, I am looking at it from the perspective of the changes are destined to occur, and all I really have to do is allow them to occur. Now that can be a lot at times because a lot of them are going to places, attitudes or shifts or emotions, feelings inside of me that I'm not historically comfortable with, don't want to deal with, don't want to see things that way. And that really is what the gist of my talk, because we clearly are in a time or a period where there is a lot of change going on. The transits are powerful, and that's going to be going on for some years to come. So everyone is going to be dealing with this, whether they're aware of it or not, and whether they want to deal with it or not, because it's here. And to me, it's because it's time collectively for us to shake off a lot of the ways we have looked at life and ourselves and why we're here and even who we are. And that's what's going on. Now, for those of you that are already in processes of deep change and have been experiencing them, as we know, it's not comfortable at times. It's very uncomfortable at times. There can be loss, there can be a sense of loss, a sense of confusion, uncertainty, even fear, as part of the process. And to me, the deeper change that's going on is evolutionary astrology talks a lot about the soul. And to me, the change that's going on is we're moving from states of consciousness of I'm a person or a personality and I have a soul, to literally becoming aware of myself simultaneously as person and as soul, where the person and the soul cease being two different things. The relationship between them changes. Um, I would say 99 and whatever percent of humans, especially in our culture at this point, whatever our beliefs are and whatever we strive for and all this, we operate from an effective reality most of the time of awareness of self as individual, as personality. And that is shifting. And the parts of us that are personality, and I would put the body in there, the biological apparatus, because its function has been to keep us alive in the form that we're in. And, which is why death is in a lot of ways, still the great unspeakable to people in their lives individually. Because we are so identified with the person, the character that we see ourselves as, that this seems like this unknown an end. From the soul's perspective, this is just, like going to Europe for a year or two, so to speak, of where we have a life and we have various experiences, and then we move on into other experiences. And the shifting that's going on is becoming more and more aware of that from that perspective. They're both true and real. The personality perspective is not wrong and is not a mistake or an illusion. It's real, but I feel like, or I speak from myself and what's going on in my own life, I feel like my perspective on the relationship of those two is shifting. And I can no longer look at them the way that I have for most of my life. I want to start, I didn't know I was going to do this, but so last night in the middle of the night, I was up in the middle of the night and I happened to find a Facebook post on this group called Pluto, Your Soul's Desires. I think some people are probably part of that group. And occasionally I answer or I comment on something somebody wrote on there. And it was very interesting. It caught my attention. That's a very Scorpio-oriented group, which is why I kind of like it. And somebody posted, I'll try to summarize, how many heavily aspected Pluto people feel frustrated by their intensity? I find myself wanting to dive deep into whatever interests me or captures my imagination. A lot of people tend not to understand the deep Plutonic drives. I simply can't half-ass anything. It's all or nothing. Balance is great for some things, but I don't think anything great is ever really achieved without a certain level of focus. Trying to tone myself down to match a homogenized norm is really unpleasant and sort of spirit crushing. Can anyone relate? So I could. So I started writing, and I want to say that in what I write, because at certain times something takes over me and I have an impulse and I start writing, and I don't really feel like I'm the one writing it. And that's the way this came out. That's usually the most interesting of the stuff that I write. And I wrote, watering ourselves down. I'm reading this because I think this is a good intro to what I'm talking about. Watering ourselves down or holding ourselves back, which in essence trying to manage other people's emotional states. In other words, I don't want to cause, I don't want to be the source of somebody coming up with an emotional response or reaction that I may not like, that I'm not comfortable with. So I'm going to hold myself back from what I may actually be feeling because I don't want to bring that up and then have to take it on. So what I have been learning is that's actually a form of codependency. I'm trying to manage somebody else's emotional state by not being totally honest with how I'm feeling or what is there for me to say. Now, I don't mean by that to be calling people out and confronting them and all this. That's not what I'm talking about. But it's being honest even when that may make somebody uncomfortable, which I'm about to get into. Intense, this was interesting. Intense, which is a way that I sometimes describe myself and other people describe themselves, actually doesn't exist. Intense only exists as a comparison between self and others, or one event or some other event. We call it intense. You are the way you are. It's not intense. If you're considered an intense person, you're not intense. You're being yourself. It's the way you are. Others may experience you as intense in relation to them or the majority of people. We're supposed to be the way we are. It's on purpose. This way of being a gift, though at times it may feel, this way of being is a gift, although at times it may feel like a curse. Until I see how much, who, and how I am is the gift that it truly is. If it makes another uncomfortable, perhaps they are experiencing their own growth edge. In other words, most of us find our greatest growth when something has brought us into a space that is uncomfortable. And sometimes maybe we are called or acting out in the great drama of life, being the source of somebody else's push of moving someone to their growth edge, not by trying to do anything, but simply by being who I am in that moment. I can learn to be okay with my own and others' feelings of uncomfortable. I call it becoming comfortable with feeling uncomfortable. I try to be sensitive to another's uncomfortableness when I feel it arising. But my desire is to lift myself and others to greater awareness and love. I've realized when I lower the brightness of my light from a desire to not upset another, well, the brightness in the room goes down then for both of us. For we intense types, the bright light may at times shine on our own unconscious feelings of unworthiness, giving us an opportunity to love more deeply who and how we truly are and the gifts that we bring and offer to all by being the way that we are. So that's my intro. And, as I have been talking about for a while, we come out of a culture that basically wants to increase pleasure, reduce pain, and to a large extent avoid as much pain as possible. I'm not saying we should seek out pain. I'm saying that things naturally arise in the course of our lives that we experience as painful. Very little is inherently painful. It's the way that we experience it. It's not wrong that we experience it as pain. Some of the things that we have to go through, we endure, from the perspective of being a person, are pretty doggone painful. There's no two ways about that. But also, how many experiences have you had, people you know have had, people you've read about have had, that were extremely difficult and painful, and that wound up in the long run being life-changing. I've had more than a few, and I can honestly say that I would not be the person I am today if I had not had those experiences. And they're not experiences that I particularly enjoyed, but they became turning points in my life. So the more that I look at this, the more that I understand this is actually the way life works. This is what's supposed to be happening. And our conditioning sees it otherwise. We see things as good and bad, as desirable and undesirable. We seek out this and we choose to try to get as far away as we can from that. And again, I'm not saying we should be seeking out what we're averse to just to balance that out. I'm saying in the natural course of our life, all sorts of events occur. Some we like, some we don't like. Some are stretch us, some are painful, some are horrible. But all of them, as I have been realizing, all of them, everything that occurs is actually occurring to help us grow. And it occurs from the perspective of our soul, which has a very long-term perspective. I like to use the example of parents, especially moms, raising children. And we know that to be a good parent, there are certain experiences we have to allow our children to go through, that they're going to be difficult. They're not going to like it because they're necessary for the child to mature. And, many parents, we wish it didn't have to be that way. We want to take on whatever we can or hide the child from certain experiences or try to do it for them and all this. But they have to experience certain things and they're painful. And particularly the moms feel the pain and the pain of a child that they deeply love. But that's involved in being a good mom because there's some things we just only learn that way. And I look at it that our lives as adult, we also, from the soul's perspective, we have more than a few experiences like that in our lives. Some of them go on for a very long time because they are shaping us. Interesting, I just had the picture. Sometimes you see, if you're out in the woods somewhere and you see a tree that has had some disruptive event somewhere in its distant past that has caused its growth to move in certain directions that wouldn't have occurred if certain events hadn't occurred. Could be being hit by lightning, could be by a tree growing very close next to it, pushing on it. Could be it's grown on a mountain and the wind has literally caused it to bend over. So these events shape that living being in certain directions. And this is what I see our life is about. I am really clear for myself at this point that nothing can happen, no matter how horrific, in my life that is not intended to help me grow. That is not some horrible bad karma and all of this sort of thing. in a nutshell, I think even we have been taught, or many of us have been taught, to look at karma as sort of a reward and punishment system, as a punitive thing if you do the wrong thing, and you get the goodies if you do the right thing. I see it more and more, karma as a manifestation of love. Just like the little child, if you have a child that is just not getting it, you have a loving mother or father, and you have to take certain steps with that child. You can't make the child be what they don't want to be. That doesn't work. But different approaches get taken by the parents based on the behaviors of the child. And yeah, the parent, we're conditioned and we like the good kid and we don't like the troublemaker kid, blah, blah. But take that part out of the picture. Just look at it. When you start looking at it from the perspective of a soul, it's like, well, I have these children, and it's not a mistake. They are the way they are, and I don't control them, and each one has their own destiny. And my job, my task, you can look at their astrology. What are they intended to become? What are their lessons? How am I, as the guardian here for a period of time, to steer, to guide these children in these directions? What are the pitfalls or the places where they have clearly tended to get stuck or hung up in the past? And how can I best assist them with this? I'm a I'm a graduate of the guilt and shame them school of parenting, or being a child who was subjected to the guilt and shame school of parenting, and that is effective in some ways, but it's not particularly healthy. So what other, and it's very, very common, of course, in our culture and in our world. But so what other alternatives are there? That's a rhetorical question. How would I raise children more consciously? And I think some of the value of using the metaphor of a child is that we can look at ourselves in the same way, because we're children of the universe, so to speak, or children of life. And even when we're, quote, old, we still are children in many ways, and we have a lot of souls that seem to be like child souls, and they're growing on this planet, and they're growing. And what if everything that is occurring is trying to help us in the most loving and caring way possible to learn what we need to learn? That's how I see more and more what's going on, what's actually going on. Some of the things I wrote, because I'm not everyone probably saw my write-ups, pretty short. I wrote basically, let's take a step back just for a moment and remember the purpose of change, even, quote, rug pulled out from under me, quote, level of change. Change can certainly at times be uncomfortable, unwanted, scary, and uncertain. But at other times, it also brings hope, joyous, relieving, releasing of old, of the past. Why does there have to be so much change? Why do I have to have these transits that mess up my known life, maybe even my known sense of who I am? One of the great things that I learned from this, having been a spiritual seeker for a long time, where, like, it's not spiritual to be angry or not like things or get mad about stuff or frustrated and all this. No, that's a distortion that many of us have been exposed to. I don't have to like any of the change. And more like it and more usual, within any person, we have different parts of ourselves that have differing points of view and perspectives. And I can have some parts that are really excited about the promise of change and the movement of change. And I could have other parts that are really scared about change and the uncertainty of what's going to happen to me, or, oh my God, this could happen, the bottom could fall out, and all this sort of thing. So all of these parts, these are part of our internal struggles. I call it sometimes our internal wars. I mean, you know, we're trying to create a world where people can converse and get along, yet a lot of us don't even have peace within ourselves, because we have these different parts with these different perspectives. And on Tuesday, this one's riding high and I'm finally on the right path and this is the way it's going to be. And Thursday afternoon, the other part comes back. So what I say to this now is what we're actually doing is integrating all the parts of ourself, from fragments, fractures, you know, trauma, Aquarius, fractured pieces, fractured parts. They are learning how to understand and support each other and integrate together. And instead of being all upset with each other, to realize that they're all, each of these are part of what's going on inside me. And all the parts and me as the cohesive so-called adult part can help facilitate this. It's like we have a number of kids. We have a number of, you know, this is the inner child. But the gist of it is we have more than an inner child. We have a number of kids floating around inside there. And they're of different ages and different times in our life and different experiences. And they represent unresolved emotions, unresolved traumas, and the work that we're doing, the process that we're in, is giving honor and support and acknowledgement to these different hurt parts of ourselves. I don't know if I've used the example in here before. You know, when I was a kid, I was known as an angry kid. And so, you know, my parents told everybody what an angry kid I was. And they didn't like that I was an angry kid. So lo and behold, I grew up and I'm uncomfortable owning my own anger. I got rejected for being angry. Why would I want to express anger? I don't want to be rejected. That's all well and fine, but I'm rejecting myself in doing that. Now, I don't mean that with my anger that I should, you know, go out and yell at somebody or punch them or, you know, go into road rage. That's an immature expression of anger. So what does a mature expression of anger look like? Well, I'm learning that. I'm not, I'm not the fastest student on the block, but I am learning it. And it's more like being able to express my emotions, my feelings, and not blaming them on somebody else. You know, the child approach is, because of what you did, you made me feel this way. And we kind of have a lot of our country runs on this, that are on a lot more than children. So what, you know, the gist of it is, in moving into ownership of emotion, nobody can make me feel anything. People can act in a way that sets off or triggers experiences that I've had in myself that are incomplete. They didn't make me feel that way. That emotion was inside of me. Actually saying to that person, you made me feel this way, is basically invalidating whatever it is they're feeling or doing. Because I'm not accepting it, I'm judging them. I'm responsible, or I am the source of whatever is coming up in me emotionally. That's hard to own, because if the stuff that's coming, I found some years ago that I had this huge bedrock of shame from the way that I was raised that I didn't even know I had. And I detested that feeling. It was the most horrible feeling in the world to me. It felt like being slashed with razor blades inside of me to feel that way. And I would do pretty much anything to get out of feeling that way. And my number one strategy was to throw it back in the other person's face. Oh yeah, well, you know, what about you? You say I do this, but you do the same darn thing like this, blah, blah, blah. I found that was not a very effective strategy, although it took me decades to realize that. But what I realized is the reason I was like that is because underneath my feeling was this horrible sense that there was something wrong with me, that I was acting wrong or bad or shamefully, and I was too stupid to understand how to act in any other way. All this was triggered off in me. This is what I realized, which is why I pushed back, because I didn't want to feel that. So those are parts of myself that I rejected. Well, I have little parts, sensitive little kids that that experienced all this shame. For me, it was more covert. I mean, I wasn't laughed at in my face very much, very often, but it was just, you know, because my parents had their own version of this. And so it's what I call the gift that keeps on giving. They passed it on. So what I found is I rejected those parts of myself. Well, lo and behold, there's a little kid inside that feels terrible about himself because nobody likes him. So I started realizing I can become my friend of that part of myself, a playmate, and also a helper to that part of myself by accepting him exactly where he is, stop shaming him, and start and asking him, you know, tell me about what you're feeling and tell me about what it's been like being you. And what is it that you need? What would you like more than anything to hear? What is it you've been waiting for to hear? And little by little, slowly but steadily, uh, applying what I'm speaking about to myself is dramatically changing my relationship with myself and with life. Because I find that I am not an unworthy person. Dare I say, I'm an awesome person. And I say that not on some ego trip, because we're all awesome people. Every one of us is an awesome person. And so many of us, especially, it seems, the most spiritual, giving, caring, kind people, in a lot of ways, seem to have some of the worst self-images. And that's the conditioning that we've received. And I'm not even, to me, I mean, I spent decades trying to find the source of this and getting to the root of it and all this. And I'll tell you at this point, the way I see it is that our planet is waking up. And what I mean by that is becoming more aware of who we really are as souls, as emanations of divinity, divine light, you know, little droplets of God and so forth, goddess and so forth. And we that understand these things or are interested in these things or grasping them are kind of like a leading edge of the change that is going on. And we are grounding, we are here to ground this. And in order to be here, we needed to be born. In order to be born, we needed to be born into a family. And since 98% of all families are highly conditioned in this way, that way, and the other way, we take on the conditioning. We took on the conditioning. And that conditioning is not who we are. And we, like everyone else, lost track of who I really am and got conditioned. This is not because I'm bad, unspiritual, stupid, missed the point. None of that. I would say that's exactly the way it was intended to be. Because our work of breaking free, releasing this conditioning, and it starts in the acknowledging of who I really am as a soul, as a spark, a piece of this beautiful divinity that at its core is the essence of love in the most profound way. And here we are learning various lessons and helping various people to come to better relationship with themselves, with their purpose, why they're here. And in that way, we are collectively affecting the whole planet. And that has been the whole point all along. That's what we're doing here. And it's okay. It's absolutely okay. Whatever I feel my deepest flaws, faults are, they're absolutely okay. I haven't missed any boat. I'm exactly where I'm intended to be. And all that is temporary. Am I going to totally snap out of this and break it and become, quote, enlightened in this lifetime? I don't know. And I dare say, to me at this point, that isn't even the point. Because the gist of it is everyone everywhere is destined to be enlightened at, quote, enlightened at some point in time. And it happens when it's supposed to happen. And it doesn't happen before it's supposed to happen. And my desire to want to move in those directions is part of getting there, but it's not like running a race where it's who gets there first. Everything that I'm doing, that you're doing, that everybody you know is doing, that is doing any kind of sense of self-awareness, self-healing, and so forth, we are doing the process that lays the foundation to take the whole planet to the next level. And the planet, to me, I see more and more. When you look at all these transits that are coming, the quickening of everything, the deal-breaking transits, the end of structures that have existed for hundreds, thousands of years, all coming faster and faster and more concentrated. These are not accidents. This is what I call in the script. And we're responding, we feel this, we know this, we know it ahead of the time when a majority of people can acknowledge this. We're still having serious arguments over, is the climate on the planet changing, and could human behavior have anything to do with this? That's kind of lagging a bit. But where I'm working, that's awesome work that people are doing, and it needs to be done. But there's a deeper work that we are doing in becoming aware of our souls and seeing ourselves as a soul and developing self-love, self-care, self-nurture, and self-acknowledgement. because this becomes the foundation of changing the underlying structure. Until I know this, until people see this and know this, why would I want to create a reality where somebody else might have more than I have? The awareness that the more that we all do for each other, that what I do for myself, if I'm doing it not in a selfish scarcity way, but advancing myself, I am advancing everything and everyone through my efforts, as are you and you and you and you, through our efforts. And I haven't seen this as clearly as I do now. It's very clear to me. We are feeling a deep impulse of what is coming, and we are responding to that. So I remember I wanted to bring up, a saying that I heard recently, and I don't think it's very new, but it was new to me. And it was 4 words: hurt people, hurt people. And I found that to be profound. Hurt people, hurt people. So the source of hurting people is hurt people. So what can we do to help hurt people? I can't save anyone. I can't make anyone do anything. How can I inspire people who are having a difficult time, who maybe are on the verge of giving up or giving in or whatever, to just hold on? Because again, hurt people have learned that they are, worthless or bad, or all of these type of experiences and emotion, guilted, shamed, and in many cases they're angry about what they have been through. And from their perspective, they have good reason to be angry. I don't think, I am not a Pollyanna kind of person that thinks that, you just love somebody that's been through something for, 2 months or 5 years and their whole life's going to be different. I don't see that. And I don't see that many people, are only going to get so far or aren't interested in having a change. But I'm focusing and concentrating on those who want change and don't necessarily know how to change, because that's what I call a ready market. And there's a lot of service in this. The deepest thing that I feel I can do at this point in working with people is to help them reframe their thinking, the way we want to reprogram our subconscious. And we're not aware of our subconscious, which is why it's called the subconscious. I notice it a lot in my self-talk, where my self-talk has tended to be very critical, self-critical. When I'm critical of myself, lo and behold, I'm critical of others. Isn't that amazing? So that's the filter that I see life through. So as I turn this around slowly, when I catch myself now saying something to myself or even thinking something to myself, that's kind of like that I notice is critical or cutting myself down or not giving credit to myself or, thinking there I go again and so forth. I consciously stop and plant a new thought, plant a new seed. and to honor and acknowledge myself for all that I have been through, all that I have done and seen, and where I am now, and how this is all unfolding. And little by little over time, I notice a change where it's becoming more automatic in me. I'm having my autopilot inner process is far more self-nurturing and self-appreciative than it ever has been. I mean, beyond what I ever thought I would ever experience. And in a way, this is a spiritual practice for me at this point. It's just noticing and observing and turning criticism into affirmation. I don't know, I can't remember. Yeah, I don't remember what I was going to say. I do this with others now too, and I do it, I've noticed I've had a tendency to kind of put things out in a commanding sort of way, like this is the way it is. And by the way I phrased things. Example, this the title for this talk, the last series of talks I've given, I haven't made up these topics. I've had no idea what I was talking about and what I was going to talk about. And somewhere before the talk, I don't know what I'm talking about. Somewhere before the talk, I turn inward and go, okay, what am I talking about this time? And lo and behold, within 5 minutes each time for the last 4 or 5 talks, I've had a phrase appear in my head out of the blue. I have been very skeptical of this kind of stuff, and it's happening to an extent that I can't deny that it's happening. And as an example of what I was talking about, so when it appeared in my head as remember, all change is a gift, like with a colon, remember, all change is a gift. And I wrote that down because that's the way it came to me. And then I looked at it and it was like, and that's the way I used to talk. And I looked at it and I said, that kind of sounds like a command. That's not real friendly. It's not really warm. And so it became remembering that all change is a gift. Because I'm one who's needing to remember that also. I'm not a great expert sitting up here telling, anybody all that I have come to. I'm deeply in this process, and it's very human. And I want to make it really clear to anybody I can talk to that it's a very human process and we're all in it, and we all have periods where we feel bad about ourselves, and that's actually part of the healing. Because one way to look at it is when I'm changing my perspective around like this, so many times I've heard people say, well, I was really making some progress, but now I'm backsliding because the same old patterns or thoughts are coming up. I used to do that myself. But now I see clearly that's not what's actually going on at all. The changes that have occurred in me, my ability to hold emotion and perspectives that I was very uncomfortable with before, have actually created space where parts of me that have not felt safe to surface can show up. Because I'm not going to kick them out of the room and tell them to go to their room or grow up and behave. It's kind of like, the old part, an old part, for example, maybe I'm really mad at somebody. Maybe I just talked about how, nobody can make me feel anything, but that doesn't mean I don't have parts of me that blame things about how I'm feeling on somebody else, and that part may show up. So now, instead of kicking it out of the room with my new spiritual, awareness, I'm like, okay, well, let's look at this. How are you feeling? What are you feeling? First of all, it's okay that you're mad. It's okay that you're mad. I'm not feeling like this means I'm backsliding. This is part of me that's coming up because it feels safe enough to show up, and I can hold it. It wants to know that it's okay. It's okay that you're angry. It's okay. It's okay that you're scared. It's okay that you don't like what's happening, even though I'm telling you it's a gift, but you don't like it. And that's okay. Some of these gifts don't seem to come with instruction manuals on how to use them in a gift-like way. They just kind of appear, and they're kind of hard. It's like a lot to bite off at times, and it's okay. And I'm going to have reactions to it. And my new approach is all these parts of me are okay, but I want to work them out as much as I can within myself, or hold them within myself. In other words, I don't want the part that's mad at so-and-so to unleash on so-and-so, because even if so-and-so did something that I feel is kind of off, they were doing the best they could do at that time, even if I don't like it. So they're not wrong. They're doing what they did. My choice is not to correct them and tell them the error of their ways, but to honor that they need to be in the place they're in. And maybe I don't want to be that close to that situation where they're in these places, because I don't feel like I really need that anymore. But I wish them all the best. Genuinely wish them all the best, because again, it's hurt people hurt people. And I wish for them to find healing for their hurt, because that makes a better world. And I can still have parts of me that are frustrated with what they did, and that's okay. I don't have to pretend that I don't feel that way. But that's not the totality of how I feel. It's part of how I feel. I wonder if anybody has comments or questions. I'm not sure if I have more to say right now.
Yes, Steve, it's Linda. When you said hurt people, what about hurt people are compassionate to other people?
I'm sorry?
What about, instead of hurt people, what about hurt people are compassionate towards other people because of the hurt they've been through?
Yes, that's where we're going.
Ah, okay.
If you look around the world today, you see hurt people hurting people. What you're talking about, to me, is how we change all this. And it's not going to happen in 5 years. As it may take some, to me, time is accelerating. So I can only go on, a year to me now seems like 3 months used to feel. But this to me is where we're going. The more that people at large, in their own way, whatever way that is, begin to really understand that the world is not the way it appears to be. It's not all these people that are separate and against everyone else, and everyone is for themselves. That this is some kind of strange dreamland of a soul, and that there is this so-called oneness thing, that we're all really connected, and we're all, the whole world, the whole universe is our brothers and sisters. I don't feel like I personally am intended to have a close relationship with, 98% of the people that appear in my life. I'm not saying that, but I don't need to have a close relationship to support what everyone else is doing. And the more that I show caring to a hurt person, the more they find the place inside to show caring to other hurt people. And that's what you're speaking about, Linda. So that to me is where we're going. And I think the best way to go there is for me to become, I was a hurt person and I didn't intentionally hurt people, but I did cause hurt to people unintentionally, not overt, but in other ways. And we can, we can stop this. We can change this. Looking at the comments here.
It would be great if the members of our audience could unmute and just speak their comment rather than type it into the chat. It would be so much easier. Thank you. Go ahead.
Hi, Linda. I'd just like to say my daughter's father is who he is, but he was so hurt as a child, like a bad movie. But he consciously chose during her childhood, he would think, okay, what would my father have done? And he chose to do the opposite. And that worked out pretty well in their relationship. But I know other people who have had horrific childhoods, who have been beaten as he was, who have been in refugee camps, etc., who are not able at this point to choose that. I'll do the opposite.
Exactly. Exactly. Now, when you look at this from a soul perspective, and again, I don't see into past people's souls, so I'm not saying this is what happened, but I'm giving a frame. If you look at it, sometimes someone who wants to learn certain lessons might take on a father like that. So that as they arose, because this created the contrast. It's like it's a form of lev. It's like I am not going to pass on to my daughter what I had to persevere through. And the fact that it was so intense makes that determination even stronger. So I say, or I'm seeing, that in some cases, not all cases, in some cases, people consciously, souls consciously take on the difficult situations because they will motivate for great change within the person that's experiencing them.
Okay, Jen, go ahead.
It's a great talk, thank you. And I appreciate the healing that you have done in your life. And similarly, I've done the same. And I think, yes, collectively we're adding another one that's healed out there into the mix in the world. And I'm watching my young grandson at the moment, who is quite misunderstood in the education system, and I look at him with the compassion of where I've come from and thinking he's come to teach those people around him to, he's taken on, it seems like I see his soul has taken on that role and getting other people to look at how they interact with him. And And it's a really interesting viewpoint that you've raised that today.
Thank you. And you know, the beauty, Jen, is that you are aware of this. You know, it's one of the things, you know, I remember when I was young, the people who are like the Scorpio people that I read about, or you know, read what I wrote earlier. People who feel different in our current world tend, in a lot of cases, to get shamed and blamed and labeled and so forth for it. And so having even one person in their life that understands them can give them the sense inside that they're on the right track, that they're not doing anything wrong, and that there's nothing wrong with them. And so you're just being aware of that and holding that space for him can make a huge difference in his life.
So, Steve, as an example of that, my boyfriend's temper is pretty horrific and pretty scary. So I'm learning to basically do unto others. So allow him and to accept that part of him, just in the same way as I'm accepting all the parts of myself. I'm not saying to allow oneself to be hurt or, you know, violated or anything like that, but just normal temper, just anger.
Yeah. Well, it brings up a point too, and I'm just making this point. I'm not subtly implying that it applies here. I just feel like it's a corollary that goes with it. There is such a thing as abuse. And there's not, what I've seen is there's no line, so to speak, that says this is anything past here is abuse. It's not that clear. But each person needs to know or to recognize when they feel they're being abused. Because it's not about learning how to love being abused. That's not self-love. We need to know when to take ourselves out of certain situations. And anger is valid. Even a person that, you know, I mean, everybody has, from their perspective, they have reasons for doing what they're doing. But it's more like we also need to serve ourselves in the deepest way of what's right for me and what's not right for me. Because sometimes the lesson is I need to get out. And again, I don't know anything about your relationship with your boyfriend, so I'm not implying that. I'm making this just as a general principle. Because self-respect and self-dignity is the bottom line. And we, spiritually and growth-oriented people tend to be willing to sacrifice ourselves for the good of others. And that can go too far. That's what I've learned. It can go too far.
But at the same time, we need to be able to cope with all the different parts of not only ourselves, but of other people.
Yes.
Right.
Yes. I mean, the gist of it is, you know, for a person who has a lot of anger, is kind of trying to get down into that place. I started being sent to therapy at a ridiculously young age. And I've learned it's not so much about what happened, it's more about what's the need. In other words, for a person who has a lot of anger, they were hurt in certain ways. So they have unfulfilled needs. And they have learned that from experience, they're not going to get those needs filled. And that sustains the anger. So some of it can be getting down in there and finding out, what does that angry person actually need? What are they really looking for? You have to kind of poke down below the anger.
Steve, that's a great point. Jen, go ahead with another comment.
Yeah, it's just some of us in life have come here and we've chosen to embrace relationships where the hurt people are. And unless we have the people that are coming in to do that, those people can't move forward, because it's with that example where someone does hold the space and says, this isn't about me, this is something inside that person, that they can express it and maybe see it for the first time in their life. And then, as you say, have a look at where is it coming from and start to move forward themselves with it. So that your comments between the two of you just brought that to me too.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay, Monica, did you have a comment to make?
Hello.
She says
Hi.
hello.
Yeah, hi. Thank you so much. This is such an interesting conversation, because it's very Plutonian, as you were saying from the very beginning. And I see like a lot of things that correlate to my experience of not so much being angry, but just allowing so many things to happen to me in a very abusive relationship that I had before when I was married, and then how I learned to discern and to accept what things I could change in the relationship in order to set up the limitations and therefore move and make a transformation. So it was not so much about trying to make the other person change, but how much of it I can go to the polarity point of Pluto, understand what is important for me in terms of like my own needs. So I set them up, and then I can make a decision, and then I can move and transform. So this, like you said, so many things today that they were really touching to a lot of the stuff that I've been going through. So thank you so much. It's always so powerful.
You're very welcome, Monica. You're very welcome. And thank you for dealing with the hard parts, because some of this stuff isn't fun.
Okay, Steve. Oh,
Takes
sorry.
courage. Takes courage.
Yes. All right. Any final questions from our audience? And Steve, any final thoughts?
No,
Sorry.
I think I pretty much said, all that's there to say right now. I will say, it's good that Linda has organized this end of year event, because I think that next year is going to be really powerful change and rapid. I think that all of the growth that we have been seeing is going to accelerate. 2019 was an acceleration, but I think it's really just getting going, because we're going to see, I don't like making predictions, but I feel like we're going to be seeing extremes on all sides going on, perhaps over the next 10 years. We're going to be seeing unbelievably, how can that happen stuff in the not fun way. And we're going to be seeing amazing things going on. And just keep in mind, you're going to see more of the how can that happen horrible things on the news than you are the really amazing, wonderful things that are also going to be going on. And, I add that all of us, even having the interest to sit through a talk like this, is a sign of where our orientation, where our interests lie. And it's really important it's really, really important what we are all doing for the whole world, not just for ourselves. That's my closing. So
Okay.
thank you all for being here.
Steve, thank you so much. I suppose we could have gone on a little bit longer. You can if you want to.
No, it's just, I think that's about it for today.
Okay.
Don't worry, I'll be back.
Okay, fantastic. We'll see you next, the week after next on December the 19th for our Astro overview. And for now, just unmuting everybody, would you please thank Steve Wolfson?
Thank you, Steve. I really needed that.
That's brilliant. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much.
Thank
you.
You're all very welcome. Thank you for being here. And it's an honor to me to be able to speak like this and have touch people.